We got a lot to talk about on this episode of Dolphins Today by Chat Sports. I am Nick Rohloff because there are trade discussions, rumors on two fronts, Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith. And on today's show, we're going to talk about a potential blockbuster trade that features Jalen Ramsey going to Atlanta and Kyle Pitts coming to Miami. And then plus at the back end of today's show, we'll discuss a brief Jonnu Smith update. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of today's show, if a Dolphins trade goes down, we will be going live on the channel to react, break it down, and discuss what would be next. So hit that sub button. Make sure notifications are turned on. 9 away from 70,200. Join the channel because you won't want to miss when a trade goes actually down. It starts with this, and it happened over this past weekend. Multiple teams have reached out to the Atlanta Falcons to potentially acquire Kyle Pitts in a trade, the former top 5 pick out of Florida that has not lived up to the expectations. Schultz said that nothing is imminent, but there are rumors out there, one of them being floated around by Jeremy Fowler of ESPN, that if Atlanta was offered the right type of package and deal, he believes a Kyle Pitts trade could actually happen. And obviously, we go and fast forward to the Jonnu Smith talk here for a second, but maybe Kyle Pitts is the perfect replacement for Jonnu Smith if Miami ultimately trades Jonnu away and doesn't want to give Smith a new upgraded or reworked contract. Like, if you're talking and trying to power rank potential replacements that would be available on the trade market from other teams to replace Jonnu, I'm just going to be honest. It's going to be hard-pressed to find a player that is as talented as Kyle Pitts. So, yeah, I'm certainly intrigued by the idea of maybe swapping Ramsey for Pitts. And if you remember this report that came out about, 2-3 weeks ago? I can't remember the exact timeline. But Cameron Wolfe went on NFL Network, talked about the latest around Jalen Ramsey, said that line that relationships are hard, and that's kind of why we are at where we're at right now. But he also went out there and said that Ramsey would be interested in a couple of teams that he would like to play for. Wolf mentioned the Falcons, the Panthers, and the Rams in that little report. So, yeah, maybe now Atlanta, a Ramsey-Pitts trade makes a little bit of sense. And I'll be honest, I'll talk about this a little bit later more in depth. My preference is to keep Jonnu Smith in Miami. I like Jonnu Smith a lot. He already displayed that he can be very, very effective in a Pro Bowl caliber tight end in this system in just 1 year, and he is only making $4.8 million this year. But if you cannot work it out to that degree, and you do have to move off of Jonnu Smith, well, then I'm 1,000% in on trading for Kyle Pitts and getting rid of Jalen Ramsey in that potential deal. So before we talk about Pitts more in depth here, what say you? Would you pull the trigger on this deal? Would you trade Jalen Ramsey for Kyle Pitts? Today's pinned comment. So you hit with the YouTube ad break, scroll down, let it play, and answer today's question. Type T for trade or type P for pass. This is the trade offer that I would send to Atlanta in the attempt to acquire Kyle Pitts. And I actually tweeted this out over the weekend as well, which is why you should follow me on Twitter. But I would trade Jalen Ramsey and a 5th-round pick in this upcoming year's draft for Kyle Pitts. Now, some might say you are giving too much for Kyle Pitts because he is entering the final year of his rookie contract. He's been in the league for 4 years, so this upcoming year is that 5th-year option. And I understand that, but to me, a mid-day 3 pick, which really, when you talk about the selections, aren't the most valuable, and they don't really bring you much. And then you're already losing Ramsey. So if you're trying to just get a player to help your team this year, and you need to find a Jonnu Smith replacement regardless, why not try to get the uber-talented Pitts where you can trade for him? You can take the gamble and extend him before the season begins, or you can let it play out. If it doesn't work out, well, the money comes off the books, and then you move on in a different direction at tight end in the future. We are talking about a player that was thought of as the most no-brain, can't-miss prospect in some recent time at tight end. And he did a really good job his rookie season. He had over 1,000 yards. And people were like, well, he only scored a touchdown. And I was like, that'll come around. But he just hasn't been able to replicate that rookie season. He got hurt in 2022, came back and was in 2023. But this past season in 2024 was the one that is the most concerning to me, right? Because Kirk Cousins was brought in. And yeah, he wasn't that good, but you expected a veteran QB that's not really mobile to rely on his tight end in the intermediate check down and over the middle of the field game. Well, Kyle Pitts didn't get really featured that much. And then a rookie quarterback. What do they say a rookie quarterback's best friend is? A tight end. Penix didn't even look at him. And actually, when you look at the numbers, which we'll display here in a second, the tail end of this past season in Atlanta, Kyle Pitts wasn't even used. So if you are looking at that trade I just threw out there and said, well, the Falcons wouldn't do that, I disagree. Because, yeah, they don't have really a replacement tight end for Kyle Pitts, but they didn't even use Kyle at the end of last season. You look at his snap counts in the final 4 weeks of the year, it's under 50%. To me, that regime in Atlanta wasn't the one that drafted Kyle Pitts. They aren't. That was Arthur Smith and company. So if they weren't married to the tight end, they weren't married to the pick, that makes them more likely to move off of Kyle Pitts. And to me, he just hasn't lived up to the hype. And if they can get Jalen Ramsey, and if they are targeting Ramsey and they know Jalen wants to come there and pair up with Raheem Morris again, they could create a really good outside cornerback tandem with A.J. Terrell and Jalen Ramsey. Now, from Miami's side of thing, you're kind of betting on getting the most out of Kyle Pitts because we've shown his career stats. He wasn't that good last year, was ranked as a average to below average tight end when you look at the targets and the receptions and the yards and touchdowns and everything in between. But to me, I do think Kyle Pitts could be unlocked in Miami. The way Mike McDaniel runs his offense, I think, is greatly beneficial to Pitts. Because we saw Mike Gesicki struggled in Miami with Mike McDaniel. Durham Smythe struggled in Miami. But Jonnu Smith worked out really well. Why was that? Well, to me, it's because they're fluid. Jonnu is an athlete. He's really good with the ball in his hands. One of the best yak tight ends in all of football in his career. What does Kyle Pitts excel in? Athleticism. He's big body matched with his speed and his burst and his ability to make other defensive players miss when he has the ball in his hands. To me, if you are looking to replace Jonnu, I think Kyle Pitts is the one that would make the most sense. And yeah, it could be a little bit more expensive, but you are freeing up some money while trading Jalen Ramsey. Remember, you saved $9.9 million in your cap space. I haven't looked at the complete cap situation if you acquired Kyle Pitts and what Atlanta would have to keep. But yeah, that's all technical. You'll figure that out if you actually made this trade. We're more or less exploring the idea. And to me, it's a really good one. I would be all in on trading for Kyle Pitts if it just meant Jalen Ramsey in a day 3 pick. All right, we'll close the show here in a second. But make sure you get your Dolphins hoodie, not the one that I'm wearing right now. Unfortunately, I don't have this one on sale. I'll let you know if they did. But this hoodie right here, 50% off, usually $75. Right now, it's $36. Get yours today when you go to chatsports.com/Dolphins sale. Sizes are running out. Links in the description and comments of today's video. Don't wait any longer because by the time you wait a day, they could already be gone. Get yours today one more time. chatsports.com/Dolphins sale. Close the show here. Jonnu Smith trade update because last Thursday caught us all by surprise when Adam Schefter dropped a note that Jonnu Smith wants a rework contract and the Dolphins have explored a potential trade because they are hesitant to give Jonnu a new contract. Well, Drew Rosenhaus, who represents a lot of players in the Miami Dolphins, Tyreek Hill is one of them. Jonnu Smith is also one of them. Well, on his weekly hit with the South Florida local TV station, he said and was asked on Jonnu. Well, he said this. Here's what I will say on the behalf of my client. Jonnu would definitely like to stay in Miami. That is his first choice. This is where he lives in the offseason. He had a record-breaking season last year. It was the best season ever for a Miami Dolphin tight end. His dream team is the Dolphins. Hopefully, everything works out where he can stay in Miami. I'll say this right now. It is clear what Jonnu Smith wants. I don't know if, when you talk about the financial aspect of it, if he's wanting a bigger pay bump, more guaranteed money. I don't know if he wants more money or just more guaranteed. Either way, we know he wants to stay in Miami. Because when Adam Schefter had that initial report last Thursday, in that report, he said that Jonnu Smith's preference is to be able to work this out on a new contract and stay with the Miami Dolphins. And then Drew Rosenhaus said the same thing. So if Miami wants to, they can make sure that Jonnu Smith stays here. This is not a trade request. This is Miami looking to trade Jonnu because they don't want to pay him. And I have the money to pay him, so why not just give him a little pay bump? Like, it doesn't make sense why you're not doing that. Just do it for 1 year. If you don't want to get married to him for multiple more years, that's fine. Just up his money this year. He was that good for you this past season. But here's another update that I wanted to really show. And we don't really have to talk about the first part. It's just that Gabe Davis is going to the Steelers for a visit. But this is the second part here. Pittsburgh has been seeking additional receiving help. A lot of people thought that might be Jonnu Smith. But Schefter says Pittsburgh is not expected to trade for the Miami Dolphins tight end. So if Pittsburgh isn't trading for Jonnu Smith, I think Jonnu is ultimately going to stay. And this is what I alluded to a little bit earlier in the show. Even though I would love to trade for Kyle Pitts if you're getting rid of Jonnu Smith, if you had to ask me, would I trade Jalen Ramsey to X team for draft capital and then keep Jonnu Smith, or trade Jonnu Smith and then trade Jalen Ramsey for Kyle Pitts, I would rather do the Ramsey to X team and keep Jonnu Smith because Jonnu knows the system. He has already excelled in it. He had the best single season for a tight end in Miami Dolphins history. Like, I want to keep that around. And if the Steelers aren't going to trade for Jonnu Smith, then who is? Because Arthur Smith is the OC in Pittsburgh. He is the person in the league that loves Jonnu Smith the most, outside of maybe Tua and Mike McDaniel from this past season. So if Pittsburgh isn't trading for him, then I don't know who is. But let me know your thoughts real quick before we actually end the show. Do you want to keep Jonnu Smith on the Dolphins this year? Type Y for yes, type N for no. I really do. Let me know your thoughts down below. I mean, we've just never seen a tight end in Miami put up these numbers, unfortunately. Like, as sad as that is to admit, it's the truth. So, to me, when you look at how well he played and how effective he was, I just also don't want to go through the headache of trying to find a replacement. Because if you trade Jonnu Smith, all you have on the roster is Julian Hill, Tanner Connor, Jalen Conyers, Hayden Rucci, Pharaoh Brown. It's not very good. So you would have to trade for a tight end. And if it went to Pittsburgh, maybe you would try to get Darnell Washington in return. Maybe you try to turn around and say, hey, Las Vegas, are you still trying to trade Michael Mayer? Like, I don't know. But to me, you already know what you have in Jonnu Smith, and I want to keep him. And that's my prediction. Like, if the Steelers don't trade for Jonnu Smith, I think he stays with Miami. And if we take Adam Schefter's word at face value that they're not expected to trade for Jonnu, then I don't know who does. Who is out there right now looking for a tight end? And I don't want to discredit Jonnu, but it's not like he's a game changer. Like Kyle Pitts, even though Jonnu was better last year, like that's like an intriguing, like position-changing guy because of his youth and still the upside he has. Jonnu's 30 years old. Like, you're not breaking the bank to get him in your roster. So I don't know who's making that deal for Jonnu if it's not Pittsburgh. And if it's not the Steelers, then he's staying in Miami. And that's my official prediction. But we will have you covered all offseason long as we get closer and closer to training camp in the preseason in July and August. We'll have the updates on Jonnu, Jalen Ramsey, and everything in between. So subscribe to the channel and join us today.